Hey guys, it's Tiny Tom Logan back with another video for you, and today we are going to be taking a look at the ROG RTX 5080, and it is the new Astral version. Now, just in case you are finding one of my videos for the first time, my approach is to talk to you like we're having a chat in a pub or a coffee shop, or sat in the front room of your house and you're just discussing tech. That's how I like to do it. It's how I like to try and get my point across. And a lot of people say it's exactly how I am in real life as well. So with the ROG, we do have a lot to discuss. There are good things, there are some not so good things, and that is going to be what the review is going to be about. It's going to be about balance. Now, a lot of you are going to want to know something straight off the bat, so I'm going to start there, and that is the price. So we know that 979 is the MSRP for the NVIDIA founders, and that's where the cards start from. Now, we have to say start from because obviously manufacturers can produce higher end graphics cards with higher clocks and different componentry, because the Asus, they're going to say to me about their 80 amp MOSFETs and loads more headroom for overclocking. But the card is going to be in the UK start from, because the retailers can obviously then add their prices up even more, £1,365. So that's obviously quite a lot. But the balance is technically that is less than the 4080 Strix, because I think, well, the Astral is the replacement for the Strix. Effectively, they've moved the Strix branding back down the stack a bit, because the Strix motherboards aren't expensive or as expensive as like the ROG ones with the Hero and the Apex and the Extreme, etc. So they're trying to realign the branding, which is confusing so late in the day. But I get it. I just think they probably should have done it a bit sooner. Now, the best thing I can say is if you were to put a Strix logo on the Astral, you wouldn't flinch. So it is just built as you would expect. Now, about the building, they've added a fourth fan. So it's still got the 3 fans on the bottom, as you would expect, but there's a fourth fan on the back. And it's kind of like a push-pull thing, and it is exhausting the air away from the back of the card. Now, we'll carry on with the aesthetics, because there's a lovely light bar down the side, which you would expect. But then when you get to the underside, as if you had it vertically mounted, you've got a light bar that sits above the first 2 fans, but then for my OCD, really annoyingly, isn't over the last. And I genuinely don't understand why. If it's pointing downwards, which, let's face facts, for the most of you people out there, it isn't going to matter. But paying £1,365 for a graphics card, I want that strip over all of the card, not just 2/3 of it. And then that does mean, like I said, if you've got it vertically mounted, you've got 1/3 of the card without that little light bar there. It doesn't make any sense. And it winds me up. Like, genuinely, it's the one thing about it that kind of spoils the aesthetics for me. I would have to have this just normal horizontally mounted, normally mounted, and then you're not going to have to worry about it. Other than that, big black heatsink, built like an absolute tank. You are still going to need to run a graphics card support, which is why you've seen one in the B-roll, and that's because there is a couple of mil sag if you don't run it. Now, I've tried to tweak with the back of the case, get everything in there as best as I can do, but it has, maybe because of the weight, sagged a little bit, but it's not a deal breaker, because the majority of us now run card supports, and we get creative with them and have Lego men and little like trolley jack things for model cars. There's loads of ways that you can do it. It doesn't have to be the end of the world. And I've got a thing to kind of say that if the fact that it's got a bit of movement in it is the reason why you're not going to buy it, you probably weren't going to buy it in the first place anyway, because it wouldn't be a deal breaker if you were prepared to spend the money. Now, the new addition of that 4th fan, this is something we have to cover quite early on, because that 4th fan, when you're using it, gaming, even just gaming, because normally I would be moaning because in a benchmark, it was noisy, and it was because I was using OCCT or Furmark or something, and I was doing stuff that you really don't normally do at home with a graphics card, and they're normally in a game fine. This one isn't. So I'm just going to play you some B-roll now, and as you can hear, there is a tone difference, and a big tone difference as well. This is the loudest card that I have tested. And it's not like I've only tested a few, because I can pull a few out of the bag straight away, and that's without the Founders Edition cards, that's without the MSI that's already been and left. I've tested a lot of graphics cards so far. That, and it is only the 4th fan. I did wonder if it was an airflow problem between the bottom fan and the top fan, so I was trying to slow down the bottom fan in some of the testing that I was doing, and it just appears to be that that top fan, once it starts to move air, you can hear it. It's not a motor noise, it is an air movement noise. It is one of those ones where I think ROG are going to have to set it so that fan doesn't spin very fast, because it's intrusive. Now, I've had lots of cards here over the years, and I would say this is one of the loudest cards we've had in for a significant amount of time. Now, the problem with that is, with a £1,365 card, that fan should be inaudible. It is just not going to be acceptable. Now, in the area of balance, I'm going to move on, because the performance is on point. It is fast. It is one of the fast. Predominantly, it's the fastest 5080 that I've tested. Now, the clock speeds kind of indicate that it was going to head in that direction anyway, because it is the highest clock speed 5080 that I've tested, both in the boost and in the average, and the average is the critical one. It did use a fair amount of power, but that's obviously because they've wanged the power limit up to allow those clocks. And that's how an overclock card works. You are not going to get an overclock card that uses less power. It's just not going to happen. So I'm all right with it using more power. That's fine. I'm not particularly fussed about if a graphics card uses a little bit more power or a chunk more power. If it's going to run quicker than my mate's graphics card, or if it's going to give me more frames than it would have done if it hadn't been sipping a little bit more of the electricity. So power we're fine with. With the performance, it was pretty much at the top of the graph for 5080s consistently. It didn't matter whether we were in DLSS 4, the normal 4K rasterized games, frame gen, it didn't matter. It did exceptionally well. But this is where the tripping point is. And this is why I said we needed to have a chat. We were going to talk about like mates in a pub. And that is that £1,365. If you have a look in the graphs, you'll see there is a pallet Game Rock. It is normally right below it. It is normally within a couple of frames difference. That pallet Game Rock card I have here, and the MSRP for this one is going to be, and it's the overclocked model. They couldn't give me an exact price, but the worst case scenario that I was told was £1,099. So we're talking a £250 difference. Now, in the Asus's defence, this one isn't built as nice. It's got a metal backplate, but pretty much everything else that you can put your hands on around the side is plastic. So it doesn't have that built like a tank build quality to it. But because it's a bit lighter, it doesn't need the support on it either. It is still a very pretty card. I will say though that personally this multicoloured front on the palette isn't as nice as the Game Rock that they used to have with the white crystal stuff on it, and I think personally this time the design just doesn't cut the mustard as much as it used to. So if you're going to go for aesthetics, I'd go for the Astral. But if you're going to go for the aesthetics, this one is an MSRP. This is the Zotac Solid. This is £979 if the e-tailer doesn't bump the price up. It's built like a tank. It's still got the big support on it. It doesn't sag, even though it weighs a ton. And it did admirably in the graphs. Was it £350 slower? No, it most definitely wasn't. So, with the Astral, you are very much going to be investing in the brand. You're very much going to be investing in that elite power delivery and the design. But sadly, the design, that fourth fan, has been its tripping point, and that is going to need addressing. If you run it out the box, I would say to you to install the GPU tweak software and slow that rear fan right down. It is going to make a difference to your temperatures, but it is a negative difference to your temperatures. But it is also going to make a positive difference to your use case on your desk, unless you've got cans on and you've got no one to moan about noise. My office is in the 3rd floor of my house, and I could hear that fan from the floor below. And admittedly, I've got a quiet house and I was testing really late, but it surprised me walking up the stairs with my cup of tea that I stopped, and I was like, hang on a minute, that's fan noise. And I then went looking. I actually thought it was a faulty 120mm fan in the case, and then when I realised where it had come from, I was very surprised. So it's not been the greatest start for the Astral branding, and I really hope Asus come up with a fix for it. It might be a firmware fix where they change the fan speed or something, but it definitely does need addressing. I'm also going to say I don't think it's a faulty sample, because it does sound like air noise, not a motor noise. It doesn't sound anything like that. It sounds like either a bad design or just a really awkward frequency between the fans, but I've tried slowing the bottom one down and it didn't make any difference. So I think that's something that they're going to have to fix. If they try telling me it is a faulty sample, then they're going to have to send me a non-faulty sample before I'm going to put any description changes or change any of the reviews. Is it worth the money? With that fan, I'm going to say no. And I do not enjoy saying that either. I really don't. Because for me, this is Strix V2, and it should have been perfect. For whatever strange reason, it wasn't.